On this Monday night, Canada's first pandemic budget and your bottom line. Ottawa's multi-billion-dollar blueprint for an economic recovery, the emergency benefits being extended, and for how long, plus the promise of $10 a day daycare.
We will get it done.
The focus on a greener economy and what's not in this budget. Plus, my one-on-one with Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland, who's now eligible for the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID vaccine. The province is lowering the age limit. And a giant leap for scientists.
This must have been how the Wright brothers felt.
The little helicopter making an astronomical ascent into the history books.
Global National with Dawna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Canada's first pandemic budget is out and it is chock full of billions in new spending. Nearly $50 billion just in 2021, spread among parents, seniors, students and small business owners. There are billions to extend emergency pandemic benefit measures that many Canadians and businesses are still relying on. The Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland calls it a smart, responsible, ambitious plan for jobs and growth. As the first female finance minister in Canada, she had said her role as a woman and a mother would inform her plans for the country. And the single biggest financial commitment is for a national childcare program, promising $10 a day daycare across the country within 5 years. There's also a promise of a luxury tax. The spending will drive the deficit up. For the fiscal year just ended, the federal deficit is expected to be about $354 billion, and that will push the national debt past the $1 trillion mark for the first time. Our chief political correspondent, David Akin, has been studying the budget's 700-plus pages all day. He joins us now. David, what are the other big takeaways?
Well, Dawna, this is a budget for the pandemic and beyond. It is 700 pages and then some thick, stuffed with brand new spending proposals, $50 billion in spending, and it's stuffed with aspirations in case the Liberals want to use this as a campaign document in a general election.
The centerpiece of the first budget ever presented by a woman is a commitment to build a national childcare plan.
This time, we're going to do it. This budget is the map and the trailhead.
But it will not be cheap or quick. It will cost $30 billion over the next 5 years and will require significant negotiations with the provinces. That's the biggest single spending commitment, but there are plenty more. For example, $3 billion to improve long-term care homes, $17.6 billion for so-called green recovery initiatives, and a new investment of $18 billion to improve health and economic development in Indigenous communities. On top of that, the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy and the Canada Emergency Rent Subsidy will be extended until the end of September. Something new for business, a Canada Recovery Hiring Program that will start in June. This will be a subsidy paid to employers who add people to their payroll. The budget also establishes a minimum wage for federally regulated companies of $15 an hour. All of this will push the debt-to-GDP ratio from pre-pandemic levels of about 30% to more than 50% this year, and it will stay around 50% for at least the next 5 years.
The question is, are we fiscally sustainable? We are, but there's a big but. That also makes assumptions that things like interest rates will not change significantly in the medium term.
So now to the politics of this budget, because of course this is a Liberal minority government and the Liberals will need at least one other party to support this budget and to avoid triggering a general election this spring. Dawna?
Okay, David Akin in Ottawa, thank you. There have been multiple calls and promises for a national child care program, one that would be affordable, accessible, and high quality. It is crucial to getting women back into the workforce. Now, as Abigail Bimman reports, Chrystia Freeland thinks she is the finance minister who can deliver it, making affordable child care a reality at $10 a day.
She's 8 months old, and Amaya's parents have been searching for childcare her whole life. Her mom starts a new job next month.
She's on multiple wait lists right now, and nothing has really come through.
Tough to find and to pay for.
Definitely we'll have to compromise on many more things if we want the best care.
Toronto has the highest childcare fees in the country, more than $70 a day for a toddler. Edmonton is around the middle, around $44 a day. Quebec offers the cheapest, less than $10.
Sometimes it even makes me want to think about not going back to work and just staying back and caring for her. But I think about the impact it has on what she'd think about me if her mother, being such a qualified person, just gave up and sat back at home.
Speaking as your finance minister and as a working mother, we will get it done.
Chrystia Freeland was 2 years old when childcare was first declared imperative to women's equality. 50 years later, during a pandemic that's exacerbated the problem, the country's first woman finance minister promises to do what no federal government could in half a century.
High-quality early learning and childcare for an average of $10 a day.
A 50% cut in fees by next year, and childcare for $10 a day by 2026. To make it happen, the Liberals plan to spend $30 billion over the next 5 years, eventually a permanent annual commitment of $8.3 billion, $9.2 if you count previous promises.
If this is something that survives the next election, it could be truly transformative for the sector.
The Liberals are proposing to split childcare fees with the provinces 50-50 in order to make this happen. But that will involve more negotiations, and for cash-strapped provinces which don't already heavily invest in childcare, there's no guarantee they'll sign on. Abigail Bimman, Global News, Ottawa.
Earlier this afternoon, I spoke with the finance minister and asked her about that $354 billion deficit. How much does she worry about paying it off?
So, Dawna, I worry about everything. I think that's my job as finance minister. That $354 billion deficit from last year, 2020-2021, actually is lower than what we forecast. We forecast $381.6 billion. So, that is serious, but I think it's important to point out to Canadians that it's less than we provisioned for. I think the other thing I would really point out is our spending is necessary, and it's also reasonable and sustainable. Over the 5 years that this budget forecasts, we have a declining debt to GDP ratio. We have, at the end of the forecast horizon, that's 25-26, we have debt to GDP going down to 49.2%, and we have a deficit of 1.1%. So, this is the deepest recession since the Great Depression. It has cost money to support Canadians and Canadian businesses to get through it, but we can afford it. This is sustainable, and we're going to come roaring back.
Okay, let's talk about childcare. Promises, as you know, about some kind of national childcare program have been made for years. Yours is the biggest, and I know that it is vital to getting women back into the workforce. You need to win the next election and work with the provinces to implement this. So should parents expect $10 a day daycare anytime soon?
Yeah, they should expect it 5 years from now. That's what we promised. That is what we're going to deliver. And, Dawna, I do not underestimate how hard this is, how complicated it is, or how much money it costs. But I think it is absolutely essential. It's essential for families, like the really nice family that you showed a minute ago on your show. So it's essential for people's lives. But you know what? We really need this to drive economic growth. If, and I'm going to say when, we get a universal early learning and childcare system built across our country, it is going to have the biggest impact on the Canadian economy since NAFTA.
I did have another question. Unfortunately, we lost the line to the finance minister. The Liberal government sees the post-pandemic recovery as a pivot point towards a greener economy. Among the government's budget proposals, $80 million toward a net zero economy, including clean technologies and reducing emissions, a $115 million climate plan, including help for agriculture, $90 million for interest-free loans for home retrofits, and $605 million to protect nature, lands, lakes, and oceans. As Eric Sorensen reports, there is one region of Canada that is watching the green transition with trepidation: the oil patch.
The aim is to reduce the impact of greenhouse gases across the country, with incentives to decarbonize big emitters like steel companies, interest-free loans for homeowners to make houses more energy efficient, and funding to mitigate against disasters like flooding and wildfires. But if there is one sector that faces the greatest disruption and loss of jobs, it is the Western oil economy. TD Economics calculates 3/4 of oil sector jobs could be displaced by 2050. Ottawa will provide $55 million over 3 years for skills training and workforce planning, part of which will support a transition for workers in transforming sectors like energy.
We do owe them an ability to transition to what the next way of bringing energy forward is going to be.
Jim Sandercock chairs the Alternative Energy Program at the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology. Alberta has vast amounts of solar and wind potential, and the Alternative Energy Program is already expanding its training for jobs in greener energy.
This is a fantastic wealth creation opportunity as we're changing our energy systems over to something that has a lower carbon footprint, is less polluting.
Ottawa will put $20 million towards carbon capture and storage technology this year, technology that oil companies themselves have advanced. The aim is to increase carbon capture in Canada from 4 megatons a year to 15 megatons. But a big piece of that will be tax incentives, for which there is no costing laid out. It will depend on provincial participation.
We still depend very significantly on oil and gas to satisfy primary energy demand, and the likelihood that we'll still need oil and gas to play a role is quite significant. So technologies like carbon capture are actually going to be really important in lowering the emissions intensity of the sector.
Overall, Ottawa is proposing almost $18 billion in its green recovery and is promising a more ambitious climate target this week when the Prime Minister takes part in a virtual leaders summit on climate hosted by U.S. President Joe Biden on Thursday, Earth Day. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
Well, today's budget is about fiscal priorities and plans, but it is also a political document, and it's widely seen as a pre-election platform for the Liberals. Our Ottawa Bureau Chief Mercedes Stephenson is with me. Mercedes, does this strike you as the pre-election platform that a lot of people speculate it is?
Well, it's certainly a document the Liberals are ready to fight an election on, but I don't think it's one that they want to right now. And frankly, Dawna, I don't think it's one that the opposition want to fight an election on at this moment either. In a minority government situation, we'd typically be talking about the fact that the government could come down when this goes to a vote. But there's no poison pill in this, and with the third wave what it is, especially in places like Ontario, that seems unlikely. But that doesn't mean that the opposition is going to be happy with what's in here, or that there's not going to be some negotiations behind closed doors. Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole spoke this afternoon. He's not pleased with what's in the budget. Here's what he had to say.
Well, it seems there is no fiscal anchor in this plan. It's almost like a floating anchor, all depending on a massive debt and no clear plan to actually see economic growth.
Now, on the other hand, Jagmeet Singh is questioning where pharmacare and universal basic income are. All of this, though, at the end of the day, Dawna, really not the budget that the Liberals had initially wanted, not a transformative one, because that third wave just focused them to really refocus on the pandemic.
Yeah, it is not over. Mercedes Stephenson in Ottawa, thank you. More changes to the guidelines about the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine coming up. Who is now being told they are eligible for it? Police checkpoints are now set up along Ontario's borders with Quebec and Manitoba. The province is restricting all non-essential travel to try to limit the spread of COVID-19. Only those driving across for work, medical care, transportation of goods, or exercising their Indigenous treaty rights are being allowed through. And Prince Edward Island is banning all non-resident travel from outside Atlantic Canada until May 17th. The island reported 3 new COVID infections today, all related to travel from outside the region. Rotational workers and commercial truckers who arrive will need to isolate until their first negative test, even if they are vaccinated. And British Columbia is bringing in new travel measures too. Starting on Friday, Premier Horgan says police will be able to do random roadside checks across the province to make sure people aren't traveling outside their local health region unnecessarily.
They will be susceptible to all travelers, not just a few travelers. And again, they will be random, and there will be a fine if you are traveling outside of your area without a legitimate reason.
The Premier says the province will also put up signs along the Alberta border asking non-residents to stay out if they don't have an essential reason to travel. Several Canadian provinces have expanded access to the AstraZeneca vaccine. This week, people over the age of 40 are eligible in BC, Alberta, Manitoba, and Ontario. A Health Canada review recently found the vaccine safe for all Canadians. The National Advisory Committee on Immunization, though, still recommends AstraZeneca not be given to anyone under the age of 55, though that guidance could change too. Heather Urix-West explains.
When Brent Cossey turned 40 last month, he never imagined he'd be eligible for the COVID-19 vaccine so soon.
I was thinking probably at the earliest in June. That's kind of thing. When they said that they'd have 70% kind of vaccinated by the end of June, I thought it'd be kind of in that last cohort almost to go through.
Instead, he, along with all Albertans over the age of 40, can book appointments for the AstraZeneca vaccine starting Tuesday. Alberta's Premier made the announcement via Twitter. The decision is based on growing scientific knowledge about the vaccine and is based on the advice from Alberta's Chief Medical Officer of Health. Ontario was the first province to make the change, after Alberta, BC, and Manitoba followed too.
This is largely based on risk assessments, benefit risk assessments, and so if we look at the what we've learned more and more about the blood clot issue with AstraZeneca, how rare it is, and how what the risk of transmission of COVID is, the benefit far outweighs the risk.
Among the previously eligible age cohort of 55 to 64, there does appear to have been some hesitancy associated with the AstraZeneca vaccine. But this Ottawa family doctor says her patients are now clamoring to get whatever vaccine they can, particularly as infection numbers rise.
It was absolutely exciting to know that we would be able to immunize more of these younger patients. And also it was a bit frustrating that the decision was made that 40 would be the cutoff as opposed to younger groups, because like I said, we have many people who are in their 20s and 30s who are also forced to work outside the home.
Brent Cossey shares this frustration too, knowing his wife, who works as a teacher, is just a little too young to access the vaccine in Alberta right now. Heather Urix-West, Global News, Calgary.
Nearly 4 million vaccine doses have now been administered in Ontario. Mobile clinics are being set up in some of that province's hotspots. Residents in targeted postal codes lined up overnight to get their jab at some pop-up clinics. Over 5,000 doses have been administered to people 18 and over in communities with higher than average transmission levels. Ontario recorded more than 4,000 new COVID cases today. The 6th day in a row the number has been that high. Hospitalizations and ICU levels have also hit another high. There are now 755 critical care patients in Ontario. 516 of them are on ventilators. Ahead, Derek Chauvin's trial, the closing arguments over his hand in George Floyd's death. The 12 jurors in the trial of Derek Chauvin have now begun deliberations in Minneapolis. The former police officer is charged with murdering George Floyd. In closing arguments today, the prosecution said Chauvin betrayed the badge and everything it stood for when he pressed his knee on Floyd's neck for more than 9 minutes during the arrest last May. The 46-year-old black man gasped for air and pleaded for his life. Chauvin's defense attorney asked the jury to reflect on the knowledge and actions of what he called a reasonable police officer in a use-of-force situation with a crowd of bystanders. Chauvin is charged with second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. The jury will have to decide whether Chauvin's actions played a significant role in Floyd's death. Russian officials say they have transferred Alexei Navalny to a prison hospital. His supporters fear the Russian opposition leader is extremely ill and could die at any moment. The 44-year-old is nearly 3 weeks into a hunger strike to protest the refusal by Russian authorities to allow his own doctors to visit him. Prison authorities claim Navalny has consented to vitamin therapy. They say he is in satisfactory condition. Navalny's personal doctors believe he is at risk of heart or kidney failure and that he could be near death. He's serving a 2.5-year sentence. First flight up next, Ingenuity takes off from the Red Planet.
watching Global National.
It's really just a short flight for a little helicopter, 39 seconds in fact, but because it happened on Mars today, it is a huge leap for humankind. NASA's Ingenuity helicopter made history. Mike Drolet looks at how it happened and what it means for our ambitions on the red planet.
Oh, the wait must have been excruciating. At 3:34 a.m., the Ingenuity helicopter was told to fly. And for more than 3 hours, NASA scientists waited for the satellites to line up so the data could stream back to Earth.
Altimeter data confirm that Ingenuity has performed its first flight of a powered aircraft to another planet.
For posterity's sake, this is the first picture taken by Ingenuity in the air. The rover Perseverance was the only witness to the short flight, which had been delayed twice because of technical issues.
When things work, it looks easy. I would like to take this opportunity to remind how difficult it is to fly a rotorcraft at Mars.
Now that they've proven it works, scientists like McGill's Richard Leveille are eager to see what it can do for actual science, like investigating subsurface lava tubes they believe exist on Mars and the Moon.
This opens up new ideas for missions. Now we're not only stuck with proposing, where can a rover go? We can start dreaming up these crazy ideas that will maybe one day become a true mission.
For now, NASA's finest deserve a moment to exhale before firing up Ingenuity for another flight. Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
And that is Global National for this Monday. I'm Dawna Friesen. We want to leave you with something to aspire to, something people in Australia and New Zealand are now able to do. Remember airport hugs?
Welcome back to Australia.
Hugs and kisses, the first in more than a year. People in Australia and New Zealand can do this again because they've formed a quarantine-free travel bubble. It looks like the end of the movie Love, actually, but I swear it's not. Kind of gives you the same feeling, though. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.